Good afternoon, everybody. It's Friday, the Friday before Labor Day weekend, and this is the teaching video for our simple gatherings on this coming Sunday. That'll be September the 6th, and really sort of the end of our summer plan here. We'll be looking at moving in towards our fall pattern and our cold weather meetings as early as next Sunday. We might try to take advantage of warm weather while we still got it and enjoy that and the safety that affords us with the current situation. But I think as a leadership team, we feel comfortable knowing that we're really tracking with the state of New Jersey, and indoor dining starts today. So that's been a kind of a sign that we're following the pace of things as government officials are giving us guidance. And so we'll be putting that together, and that again will probably be a larger community meeting that is less frequent than we've had in the past, but serving to just pull us all together and but also continue to build our relationships in these simple churches in the weeks and months ahead, at least through year end. So we're going to continue to try to do the best of both things. Larger sense of corporate meeting and worship, but also building strong relationships around the teaching together. So just to give you an orientation, and the details of that will be coming out to you in the week ahead. But I hope you enjoy your Labor Day weekend. We'll look forward to seeing everybody on Sunday. And I, again, just look forward to the times that we're having together on Sunday morning. That'll still be at 9:30 this coming Sunday morning in the variety of simple churches that you've been in for the past 2 weeks. This will be our last Sunday in those groups. And if you've not been part of one of those simple church gatherings, now is the time to jump in. It's a great opportunity. Remember, this is how the early church met, in places, in ways like this, and in homes, and for 300 years. And this is actually the pattern that Jesus intended and the apostles taught about. And so we're gaining some understanding of that, and gaining hopefully the benefits of that, and seeing that no matter what happens, in any time, any place, the church can gather regardless of what's going on in the larger culture, because of the way Jesus and his apostles designed things. So we're working from that framework together. Let me take you to my slide set. We're taking a little bit of a directional change this weekend, simply because it's the end of summer, Labor Day weekend. I thought it'd be a time to step back and just really sort of ponder some things in the midst of our series. But I think you'll still see that there's a number of connections to it as well. So I've entitled this "A New Order for Our World," and drawing from Psalm 62. Psalm 62 we read in the reading plan over this last week, and as I read through it and thought about it, and just really seemed to strike me as really powerful thoughts and imagery, and calling for us in the midst of all the things that we're dealing with, but something that is always valuable for the life of the believer. So I hope you gain some insight from that, and have a good discussion around it. Take this video, do some reflection, read through the psalm, think about it in terms of your own perspective and your own life, and I think we'll be well prepared to have a good time of learning around it this coming weekend. We're going to be praying again this coming Wednesday night. We will meet from 7 to 8 o'clock. That's going to be what we do in the foreseeable future. This is just a great way of, in a very comfortable and very easy, convenient way, we can meet together and talk together and catch up and pray together. And I think it's really, really helped reshape and re-strengthen our family life, rather than just seeing each other from Sunday to Sunday. Many of us are making connections with one another 2, 3, 4 times a week, and that lends to much more family-like feeling and relationship and understanding in our church family. So that's something that we'll continue to do, and it's been a real blessing. We'll get back onto the Bible Project video studies this coming Thursday night. We'll be back again at 7 o'clock. That'll be a Zoom meeting as well. But ahead of time on Tuesday, you'll get an email linking you to the video to watch, the transcript of the video that you can use to read through and take notes on and reflect upon, and then a study guide that'll lead you through that. And that's what we'll get together on Thursday night for an hour and a half, 7 to 8:30 to talk about. So we're going to look into the spiritual being series. We took a look at this as a church family as a whole last summer. I introduced you to some of these videos in conjunction with other teaching that we were doing, but we're going to focus specifically on them. In the Bible story, there are these characters and these players in the background that you are part of the story, and we need to have we need to have our thinking and our understanding of them shaped by the framework of the story, not cultural ideas or traditional ideas about angels and demons or the devil or humanity or things like that. So we're going to see these through the lens of the Bible story as well, and try to get a better understanding of how they connect to the things that we've already looked into. So again, the fall plans for gathering will be coming to you. When we go indoors, it will still be with distancing, and it will be absolutely mandatory with masks. That's going to be our reality for some time, so you can be prepared for that. So we're going to try to work with the limitations that provides, still have good times of interaction, but also try to capture the blessing it is when we're all together in one place for a time. So please keep that in mind. I want to share with you Psalm 62 and put some images on the screen as I read this, in order for you to just think about, if I found myself in one of these situations, and whether it's coronavirus isolation and uncertainty that's caused, the devastation that's been caused by riots and violence, and people who've lost everything, their life's work, their businesses, their security, their safety, their neighborhoods, or whether a storm blows through and in a matter of hours wipes everything clean. Think about what it would mean to read and to reflect on this psalm at that time. Many of the psalms were written in times like this, and so just want to ask you to put yourself in the perspective, and I'll put an image on the screen as I read, just to sort of help you do that. So Psalm 62. I wait quietly before God, for my victory comes from him. He alone is my rock and my salvation, my fortress where I will never be shaken. So many enemies against one man, all of them trying to kill me. To them, I'm just a broken down wall or a tottering fence. They plan to topple me from my high position. They delight in telling lies about me. They praise me to my face, but curse me in their hearts. Let all that I am wait quietly before God, for my hope is in him. He alone is my rock and my salvation, my fortress where I will not be shaken. My honor, my victory and honor come from God alone. He is my refuge, a rock where no enemy can reach me. O my people, trust in him at all times. Pour out your heart to him, for God is our refuge. Common people are as worthless as a puff of wind, and the powerful are not what they appear to be. If you weigh them on the scales, together they are lighter than a breath of air. Don't make your living by extortion or put your hope in stealing. And if your wealth increases, don't make it the center of your life. God has spoken plainly, and I have heard it many times. Power, O God, belongs to you. Unfailing love, O Lord, is yours. Surely you repay all people according to what they have done. Psalm 62. In the light of the images that you see there that are from our current days, when we find ourselves in times of distress, as I said, the Psalms were written in a time of great distress for Israel. The Psalms took shape during or just after the exile, probably in the time frame of the exile. So kind of in the time that we're reading in now, as we've been reading in Isaiah, Ezekiel, and Jeremiah, prior to Ezekiel, and the minor prophets as we get into them now, who are all talking about God's coming judgment and what's going to happen to Israel, or what has already happened to Israel. And yet God's promises, have they fallen to the ground? Are they going to continue? Where's our hope? That's the environment in which the Psalms took the shape that they have right now. And here I have the Bible Project video poster on it, just simply, again, just so in one shot you can see when you talk about one particular psalm, it's great to know where it fits in the big picture of things. And that's why these posters are really, really helpful, because what they're looking at is the literary design, the design pattern of the Psalms. No psalm is there by accident. It's in its place and in its form by intention, all 150 of them. And so you can, you get the information if you go on the website or get a hold of this poster, which is on BibleProject.com website. But you can see the Psalms carry the themes of Torah, Messiah, lament and praise, faith and hope. The Psalms are sort of have a bookend at the front of Psalms 1 and 2 that talk about the wisdom as you reflect on the Torah, and the reflection on the Messianic King who's been promised. Those two things combined together then set up what the whole book of Psalms is doing. And it's broken up into 5 books. And again, a sort of repetition of what we have in the 5 books of Moses as well. And they're grouped, they're in these groupings. Each grouping is defined at the end by a verse that says basically the same thing. May the Lord God of Israel be blessed forever and ever. Amen and amen. And each one of these books ends with a psalm that makes a reference to that. And so that shows you that the next book is about to start. It's a marker that's been placed in the book itself, in the text itself, to help you know that. And then it ends with these 5 psalms of praise, the Hallelujah Psalms, that sort of wrap it all up and affirm what the whole book has been doing. That to praise be to Yahweh, the unique and only God of Israel, and what He has done, what He is doing, and what He will do. And so you have a book on prayer. One of their videos also talks about this being a literary temple. It's a place where you go, you read. It's as if you're in the Lord's presence and you're worshiping Him there as Israel prays to Him. And they talk about David as a prayer coach to show us and to instruct us into how to approach God and remain in His presence, and hope in what He's going to do, and go out from there into our work in the world. So the Psalms are a very, very important part of our foundation of faith, and the scriptures that inform and shape who we are as God's people today too. We draw from them, lessons from them for our day and our time. And that's what we want to do with Psalm 62. And so as you look at this, its place in book 2, Psalm 62 reflects much of what you see here, particularly in the idea of hope for a future return to the temple, the idea of I'm waiting on something for God. I'm longing for something, and that's what we have in this prayer from David, this song from David. This one is set in section 2, Psalm 62, which focuses on David's story and David's family, the hardship that he went through, and the difficult time of his becoming, being anointed king, but eventually taking the throne. The hardship he went through, persecution at the hand of Saul, the king at that time, and the enemies that were after him, but yet trusting in the Lord. David is always brutally authentic with God, and that's something that we learn from the Psalms, that we can be completely honest and authentic with God, with our deepest thoughts and our deepest feelings. It's rooted in David's longing to be in God's presence. David hasn't built the temple yet. He's hoping to, he's looking forward to, but his son actually does it. But he's speaking and talking as if he was already there. And the temple was always a foretaste of what God would eventually do in Jesus as well. And so Jesus and his people have now replaced the temple. And so we now have the fulfillment of these things firmly rooted in Jesus's life and ministry. And then the future hope that one day the whole earth, heaven and earth, will come together again and be the perfect cosmic temple for God to dwell in with his people. And so this idea of God's presence and his living among us in a temple form is replete from start to finish. It's hoping in God's reign and ultimate kingdom despite the present corrupted world. So we're honest about the way things are, but we know they can't remain that way, and they won't remain that way, and God will eventually solve all of these things. It draws on God's core essence of compassion and his justice, echoing something interesting that I've been reviewing recently through podcasts and through some work the Bible Project guys are doing too, on the first time God really explains and demonstrates his character in his own words in Exodus 34:6-7, right after the people have worshipped the golden calf and Moses has destroyed the tablets, and he goes back up on the mountain and God reveals himself to Moses, and Moses actually gets to be in God's presence in that way. This psalm echoes the tension that's in that passage in Exodus. But it also encourages the same reliance for us today on the God of David when we face similar circumstances, I should have said there, only now shaped around the person and work of Jesus. We live in a hard world. We live in a difficult world, but we have all of this history plus the history of what Jesus has done in the work of his Spirit in establishing his people in the world, and we're part of that. So this calls us back to the same kind of reliance with all of this proof and all this evidence and demonstration of who God is and what he's done. So let's get into it here. Psalm 62, just taking it part by part and making some comment on it, asking you a few questions along the way. I wait quietly before God, for my victory comes from him. He alone is my rock and my salvation, my fortress where I will never be shaken. Question that comes up: what is a fortress for? That's one of the things that we moderns kind of struggle with. Okay, these castles, some of you have been to Europe or you've been to places, and we don't live in that world, and so we don't understand how important and how essential these things are. But we do understand the idea of shelter and the idea of refuge, of being a refugee from something, or seeking refuge or seeking shelter. Sheltering in place is what we've been doing in this time of COVID-19. But we can take shelter and refuge in a lot of things other than God. What are those things? Think about what the things are that you have a tendency to or are drawn to, or that the world itself is seeking as shelter or a place of refuge. And why those things? Why do we go after those things? What do we think they will provide? How do they compare with the God who is really there and calls us and pleads with us to take shelter and refuge in him through the psalmist here? Something to keep in mind. Whenever I read these psalms, I always think about these buildings that you'll see all over northern Albania. And I've actually visited this one some time ago when I was in the town that the Kaloshi family are from in northern Albania, in the Tropoja area. This is a kula. This is a tower. This is actually a house that a family lives in, but it sure looks like an Albanian version of a castle. And you can see it's fortified. Very few windows. The door is well up off the ground. If one family is fighting or feuding with another family, this is your place of retreat. The animals are down on the bottom floor. The women and children are living on the second floor, and the men are up on the top floor where the windows open up, and they can shoot from up there. You can see the thin windows here and there where guns can, you can just stick your gun out and fire away without being in danger of being struck yourself. So this is what we're talking about. This is a place of refuge, and even today there's still this feuding aspect in northern Albania where particularly the men and the little boys are only by way of a cultural code they are safe as long as they stay inside this. If they're in a blood feud with another family because someone has accidentally been killed or intentionally killed, when they leave this tower, they are fair game. And the males of the other family have open season on the males of the other family unless they're in this shelter. And so these Psalms always remind me of the reality that many people have lived in and live in today. That's a fortress. That's a personal fortress for your family, for your extended family. Some reflections on this particular section of Psalm, waiting quietly. How many of us know how to wait quietly? How many of us have ever waited quietly? But yeah, that's what we're called to do here. And that requires a confident decision and intention that grows out of the knowledge of, faith, and experience with God. It's something we develop. Waiting quietly doesn't happen on its own. We have to do it by intention. We draw on an experience with God over the course of our lives, and we draw from the things that we know and learn in the Word. And though these things come together and help us shape and discipline our hearts and our minds to wait quietly before God. That's not something that we as moderns in our busy world, especially in our urban world here, tend to do on our own or happen. We have to work hard at this a lot. So there's something to think about. It also contrasts our hopeful vision with that of our own inner and outer reality. The idea that our victory comes from Him. The ultimate outcome that we're seeking is not to be found in and of ourselves or in the resources that we have of ourselves or in those that we find around us. Our ultimate victory has to come from God Himself. Our own energy, our own efforts, our own smarts, and the resources that we have around us can only get us so far. And that may not always happen either. There are a lot of unforeseen things. But the idea of victory, my victory comes from Him. My ultimate success, my ultimate exaltation, exoneration, vindication, whatever it is, winning only happens with God. That's true winning. And that's contrasted with the reality of the world around it. It also affirms our full and unreserved dependence on the God we know in Jesus. This has to be more than a slogan. That God is my rock and my salvation, my fortress where I will never be shaken. That can't be a slogan. He is my hiding place, as some of the songs that we sing or the literature that we read. That has to be the real deal. That has to be what we really, really mean. And we understand what that is, and we draw upon it. And it's something that we're intentional about and confident in, as the Psalm has said. Why can we be that? That answer is coming towards the end here, and we'll keep going. So Psalm 62:3. So many enemies against one man, all of them trying to kill me. To them, I'm just a broken down wall or a tottering fence. They plan to topple me from my high position. They delight in telling lies about me. They praise me to my face, but curse me in their hearts. This is David, the king, or the king to be, speaking these things. What hope is there for the rest of us if someone like this and his, we know the stories of David, but so much of us we can identify with this, maybe not in the exact same ways or the exact same circumstances, but the sense and the feeling that we're alone against so many things working against us. And I think it's even more so in the world where there's so much technology and so much connection that, we can seem to be perceived as worthless in the whole scheme of things. That what do I matter? I'm just a name, I'm just a face, I'm just a number in the whole scheme of things. Whether it's the way others think about me or the way I compare myself with, those people online or that person in social media or the things I see on TV and whatnot. And this very personal interaction, a very personal reflection from David brings it right back down to us to say, I've got to block all of those things out, and I've got to see my value and my worth directly in the face of the God I know in Jesus. That's where I need to be recalibrated. Secondly, too, that life is fragile, and something or someone seems to seek our destruction. There are forces at work against us. It's the law of entropy. It's the idea that everything is just tending towards chaos. And it's just in every way, in so many different ways, sometimes more and sometimes less. But it just seems like when you get ahead, something happens or something breaks or something this, you know what I'm talking about. Things don't go the way we hope for and plan for and work for. Life's fragile. And that's just the reality of the way things are, where we can't put our hope in those things that disappoint us so often, but yet our tendency is to do that as people. But it needs to be in God. Again, why? We'll see that here towards the end. We know in ourselves how false things can be. Do they really seek our good? The hypocrisy of things wears us down and seems ever present. Where do we turn? You know, the superficiality of life. You know, the pretending like things are okay. I'm okay. You're okay. When we're not okay. When people may be harboring things against us or we for others. And what's on the outside and what's on the inside are often very, very different. That's the reality of the world that we live in, and we probably can't change that in others. We certainly can in ourselves, but that's never an issue with God and should never be thought of as an issue with God. Um, God doesn't wear a mask. What God has in his heart, as we see towards the final verses here, is love, perfect love with justice, in a perfectly matched way that only he could be the source of. The psalmist goes on to say, "Let all that I am wait quietly before God. My hope is in him. He alone is my rock and my salvation, my fortress where I will not be shaken." So we've echoed what we saw in the earlier verses. My victory and honor come from God alone. There's another idea with the honor idea added to it. He's my refuge, a rock where no enemy can reach me. Oh, my people, trust in him at all times. Pour out your heart to him, for God is our refuge. David moves from the personal to, as your king, I'm representing you, and I'm calling you to do what I'm doing and to be like I am. Here you can see David foreshadowing what the Messiah would do and representing his people as well. And so the heart of this applies to us as followers of Jesus today, most certainly. Again, some reflection. After an honest assessment, we end up where we began. We just looked at that in the previous verses. Where do we need to return? God is my rock and my salvation, my fortress. He alone is where my victory and my honor is. So we look out at the world, we look out beyond ourselves, we even look within ourselves and we say, okay, where do I need to end up? I can't stay in those things because here's how they are, and they're not good. They're not where I want to end up in, but I can return to God. That's where my ultimate tower of protection is, my ultimate refuge. And again, this is a decision that we have to make, to put our trust in and to put our hope and confidence in God as our shelter, our refuge, our fortress, is something it won't happen by accident. It's something that we have to do despite the odds or despite the circumstances that we see around us. He adds honor, which is interesting. My honor comes from him, not just my victory. My honor is in him, my standing, my worth, my value. It's a gift which is granted to me, which can only be removed by the giver. If God is the one who gives honor, who can take it away? Nobody supersedes him. Nobody takes his place. And so honor is given and bestowed by God, and that's a kind of honor that we ought to all be seeking and all be resting in, taking comfort in. His is all we are, all we do, and we have, and all we have, because God and our trust in him, sorry for the typo there, is the only sure thing. Trust in him at all times. Pour out your heart to him. That's a sense of giving your whole self, your a whole offering of who you are, not just your time, but your talents, your treasures, some of the things that we talk about from time to time, because God is your refuge. Those things which are most valuable to you, which is basically all that you are and all that you have, your time, your talents, your treasures, are only truly protected in the refuge and in the shelter that God provides. Anywhere else is going to be a risky investment. It may or may not last. It may or may not be there. So the ultimate purpose is not, it's about the whole of ourselves and our standing with God and our effectiveness in the whole scheme of things. That is all made possible by virtue of our resting in and our sheltering in God himself. He goes on with two interesting observations here that are almost like proverbs in the midst of this that he drops in. Common people are as worthless as a puff of wind, and the powerful are not what they appear to be. If you weigh them on scales together, they're lighter than a breath of air. And then he says, don't make your living by extortion or put your hope in stealing. If your wealth increases, don't make it the center of your life. Almost sounds like you pulled those right out of the Proverbs and dropped them in here. They have that flavor to them. But looking at what they're doing here, again, we return again to the way things are. But here I see in line with the writer of Ecclesiastes, it's all smoke. It's all wind. You try to reach out and grab it, and it's not there. We come and we go, and not much remains of us or is remembered of us. Secondly, we can't be driven by what we don't have. Go steal this, go take that, go do whatever I can to enrich myself. That's common for many people. Most people in the world are in need of something. But those who have everything they need should not take shelter in what they do have. Don't make it the center of your life. He says, if you do happen to be one of those people who does have everything that you need, not only the things of the day, but beyond for a whole lifetime, don't put it in the center of things. Whether you're a have or a have not, don't put your, don't put your hope and your pursuit of life in things, or your resting in things, or let them center your life. This materialism is the center of both of these problems, those who have and those who have not. Again, the wisdom is let your full investment, let your real value and worth, let your portfolio be found in God himself. And this seems to be an appeal to wisdom. Embrace things as they are and make the right choice as your center. Not getting or not resting in what you have, but in pursuing the God who is really there, who is at work in the world as the true shelter and light of things. He closes by saying, God has spoken plainly, and I've heard it many times. Power, O God, belongs to you. Unfailing love, O Lord, is yours. Surely you repay all people according to what they have done. And a question that I raise here today, to us today, is how do we affirm today the fact that God has spoken plainly as the psalmist does here? What steps do you need to take to have such clarity and confidence yourself, and why? Can you say what the psalmist does? God has spoken plainly. I know what he said, and I've heard it many times. David seems to be, I don't think he's just using words here. He actually means what he says. And I think he's drawing from a story, and one I mentioned earlier, that the first instance where we see God really describe his character is here in Exodus 34, 6-7. The Lord passed in front of Moses, calling out, Yahweh, the Lord, the God of compassion and mercy. I am slow to anger and filled with unfailing love and faithfulness. I lavish unfailing love to 1,000 generations. Look at that, where God starts about who he is and how he is. I forgive iniquity, rebellion, and sin, but I do not excuse the guilty. I lay the sins of the parents upon their children and grandchildren. The entire family is affected, even children in the third and fourth generations, which doesn't mean that if you mess up, your grandkids are going to pay for it. It means if your kids and your grandkids persist in the same things, you can be assured it's not going to go well for them. Not that it's an automatic guarantee from one generation to the next. That's not what that verse is talking about here. It's talking about the idea that look how generous God is, even to 1,000 generations. But if one generation doesn't change its ways, it's going to suffer the same fate as the generation that came before it. So turn to the God who is driven and whose default mode is compassion and mercy. Slow to anger and failing love. And David's drawing from that here, when he says in these verses that, unfailing love is yours, but surely you'll repay all people according to what they have done. How do those two things exist in tension with one another? Well, with God, they do. And so the follower of of Yahweh in that case, and in David's case here, but for us today who know him supremely now in Jesus, is the same. A God of infinite love and perfect justice that meet on the cross where Jesus died and in the person of Jesus himself. So this plainness of speech is rooted in the story so far, and so much so for us today. God has spoken and acted, made it clear who he is and what he desires, this honest partnership with us despite the circumstances. This is the necessity of understanding the Bible story and reading it often. The more you reflect on the God of that story, the more you will understand this nature of him and how we relate to him today. Power, love, and justice are not just tools God uses. They belong to him. He owns them and is their source. They don't come from somewhere else. He is the origin of these things. That's why he knows how to use them in not only loving and careful ways, but also just ways. So second point there. And then this attribute of God is why the writer, the reader, and all the people of God then and now can shelter in place whenever and wherever, because God is always there. This fact that God is the source and wise user of power, love, and justice is why we can take shelter in him, why you should not put anything else at the center of things, and why you need to be very careful and critical and even confessing before God when you have, because God is the only one who's able to take this position and the only one who deserves it and deeply wants it and desires it with us and for us. He's created a world and a created order, a cosmic temple, if you will, to share with us. And this reflects so much the nature of the relationship that he wants us to forge with him in any and all circumstances, which we looked at earlier on. So this was a comment from I believe it was in the video that I sent to you a link for earlier today on compassion, that one of the first characteristic of God that comes out in that Exodus passage is compassion. And they go on to comment about that God's anger and judgment is a really important theme in the Bible, but it's not the whole story. God's core character is one of generous love that created the world as we know it and plans to rescue and restore that world from human evil. That's key. Exodus 34:6-7 invites us into a lifetime of pondering the depths and mysteries of the character of God, and in fact living in light of it. And this psalm is a reflection of what that looks like to see. So question for you again here: what do you need to more fully embrace and internalize to reflect this psalm in your own life right now? How operative is this psalm and its realities in your life right now? How does it guide, and is it central to your thinking? Are these foreign ideas? How do you feel about these things too? Which of the directives in the Psalms most needed right now? God is your fortress, God is your victory, God is your honor. Which of those things really speaks to your heart right now? Be ready to share that. And just in summary, here's my summary of what we might take away from this today. Overall, in light of David's hope in God and utter trust in his promises for Israel, we too must make an intentional choice to place our safety, provision, and future ultimately in God alone, rather than be directed by our devices or driven by circumstances created by others. We must honestly assess our present world as it is and know that just as Jesus did the same and brought David's hope to fruition himself, we too can wisely now live as his people, that is the people of Jesus, in anticipation of the restoration of all things that lies ahead. And indeed, that lies ahead. So I hope you'll grab your cup of coffee and reflect on this, maybe look it over again, read through this passage, Psalm 62, and reflect on it. And let's look forward to a good time of discussion about it together in the days ahead. So thanks again for giving me your time in this way, and look forward to learning together, and wish you a great and wonderful day or two ahead till we meet on Sunday morning. God bless you all.